Have you noticed that your digestion just isn't the same as it used to be? Maybe you feel bloated after meals you've enjoyed for years. Maybe you're more tired than usual, even after a full night's sleep. Or maybe your bowel movements have become unpredictable, and nobody wants to talk about that, but it matters. Here's what I want you to know. These are not just normal signs of getting older. That's what a lot of people are told, and it stops them from looking for real answers. My name is Dr. Leonid Kim, and on this channel, we talk about what's actually happening in your body after 60, and what you can do about it. Today, I want to talk about something that affects almost every system in your body, but most people over 60 never hear about it from their doctor: your gut bacteria. Research shows that after the age of 60, the diversity of bacteria living in your gut can decline by 30 to 40% compared to when you were younger. That's not a small shift. And when that bacterial community becomes less diverse, your digestion suffers. Your immune system weakens. Your ability to absorb vitamins and minerals goes down. Even your mood and energy can take a hit. But here is the good news, and I mean this sincerely. The right foods can help restore that bacterial balance. Today, I'm going to walk you through 5 foods that research supports for rebuilding gut bacteria naturally. Foods you can find at any grocery store at any price point. These are not magic cures. They work best alongside your doctor's guidance, not as a replacement for any treatment you're already on. But as part of your daily routine, they can make a real difference. Let's get into it. Before we get to the foods, I want to spend just a couple of minutes explaining what your gut bacteria actually do. Because once you understand this, the food choices I'm about to share will make a lot more sense. Inside your digestive tract, you have trillions of microorganisms, mostly bacteria, living together in what scientists call the gut microbiome. Think of it as a living ecosystem, almost like a forest inside your body. When that ecosystem is diverse and balanced, it does remarkable things. It helps digest fiber your stomach can't break down on its own. It produces vitamins like B12 and K2. It trains your immune system to know the difference between a threat and something harmless. It even communicates with your brain through a pathway called the gut-brain axis, which influences your mood and mental clarity. Now, why does this ecosystem decline after 60? There are a few key reasons. First, many of us have taken antibiotics over the years for infections, dental procedures, surgeries. Antibiotics are life-saving, but they don't discriminate. They knock out the bad bacteria and the good ones. Second, as we age, our stomach produces less acid, which changes the environment inside the gut and makes it harder for certain beneficial bacteria to thrive. Third, our diets often become less varied as we get older. We tend to eat the same familiar foods, and that repetition means we're feeding fewer types of bacteria, which leads to less diversity. The result? You may experience more bloating, constipation, or loose stools. You may get sick more often. You may feel mentally foggy or more fatigued after meals. And the gut-body connection runs deep. Research is increasingly linking poor gut health to inflammation, which underlies many chronic conditions common in older adults. But here is what I find genuinely encouraging. The gut is remarkably resilient. It can respond to dietary changes relatively quickly, often within just a few weeks. That means the choices you make starting today can start shifting things in a better direction. So let's talk about those choices. The first food on our list is one you've probably had in your refrigerator many times: plain yogurt with live active cultures. Now, I want to be specific here because not all yogurt is the same. Yogurt that's been heavily processed or loaded with sugar doesn't give you the same benefit. What we're looking for is plain yogurt, preferably with minimal ingredients, where the label clearly says live and active cultures. Those words matter. Here's why it works. Yogurt made through fermentation contains live beneficial bacteria, primarily strains of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. These are the kinds of organisms your gut needs more of. When you consume them regularly, they travel through the digestive tract, help crowd out harmful bacteria, and contribute to a healthier overall microbial balance. They also help reduce gut inflammation, which is a big issue for many people in their 60s and 70s. Multiple studies have shown that regular yogurt consumption can improve what's called gut transit time, meaning food moves through your system more smoothly, and can help reduce bloating and discomfort after meals. I had a patient, a 67-year-old retired school teacher named Margaret. She'd been through 2 rounds of antibiotics the previous year, once for a UTI and once after a dental procedure. After that, her digestion was a mess. She felt bloated constantly and had irregular bowel movements for months. I suggested she start eating a small bowl of plain yogurt every morning. Nothing fancy, just good quality plain yogurt with live cultures. Within 3 weeks, she told me she felt like her stomach had calmed down. That's not unusual. How to use it. Aim for 1 serving per day, about a half cup to 1 cup. Eat it plain or add a handful of blueberries, which I'll talk about in a moment. Avoid flavored yogurts with high sugar content, as excess sugar can actually feed harmful bacteria. One important note, if you're lactose intolerant, you may still tolerate yogurt because the fermentation process breaks down much of the lactose. But if you have significant dairy sensitivity, look for lactose-free yogurt, or try Greek yogurt, which tends to have lower lactose levels due to the straining process. And as always, check with your doctor if you're unsure. Our second food is one that might surprise some of you, kimchi, or its more familiar cousin, sauerkraut. I know what some of you might be thinking. Dr. Kim, I'm not Korean. I've never tried kimchi in my life. That's completely fine. Sauerkraut is just as beneficial, and most people find it much easier to start with. They're both fermented vegetables, and the fermentation process is where the magic happens. Here's the science. During fermentation, naturally occurring bacteria convert the sugars in vegetables into lactic acid, and in doing so, they produce enormous numbers of beneficial probiotic bacteria. These fermented foods often contain more diverse strains of bacteria than a typical yogurt, and they also provide prebiotic fiber, which feeds the good bacteria already living in your gut. So you're getting a double benefit, probiotics and prebiotics in one food. A landmark study from Stanford University, published in 2021, found that participants who ate fermented foods consistently over 10 weeks showed a significant increase in microbiome diversity compared to those who simply increased their fiber intake. That result surprised even the researchers, and it speaks to just how powerful fermented foods can be. I think of a patient named Harold, 71 years old, a retired electrician from Ohio. He was skeptical. "I'm not eating kimchi," he told me flatly at our appointment. So we started with sauerkraut. Plain, classic sauerkraut, refrigerated from the grocery store. He started adding just a couple of forkfuls alongside his lunch sandwich a few days a week. A month later, he told me his digestion felt lighter, less heaviness after meals, less afternoon bloating. How to use it. You don't need large amounts. 2 to 3 forkfuls per day is sufficient to start seeing benefit. The critical thing here is to buy the refrigerated kind, not the shelf-stable canned version. The canning process involves heat, which kills the live bacteria and defeats the purpose entirely. Look in the refrigerated section, near the pickles or specialty foods. One caution worth mentioning, both kimchi and sauerkraut can be high in sodium. If you're managing blood pressure or are on a sodium-restricted diet, enjoy them in smaller portions and let your doctor know you're incorporating them. The third food might be the most affordable and most accessible on this entire list, and it's been used for its health properties for thousands of years. I'm talking about garlic. Now, most people think of garlic primarily as a flavoring for food, and it is a wonderful one. But it also has meaningful effects on your gut microbiome that go well beyond taste. Garlic contains a compound called inulin, which is a type of prebiotic fiber. Remember, prebiotics are the food that your beneficial gut bacteria eat. Inulin specifically nourishes a group of bacteria called bifidobacterium, the same kind found in yogurt, helping them multiply and thrive inside your gut. On top of that, garlic contains allicin, a natural antimicrobial compound that has a selective effect on harmful bacteria without wiping out the beneficial ones. Think of it as a gentle, targeted reset. Human studies have confirmed garlic's prebiotic effects on the gut lining, and there's growing evidence that consistent garlic intake supports a more balanced microbial community over time. I remember a patient, a 64-year-old woman named Dorothy, who made one simple change. She started mincing a clove of garlic, letting it sit for about 10 minutes, and then mixing it into a little olive oil to use as a dip with her lunch. That was it. Such a small habit. But over time, combined with other changes, it contributed to a real improvement in how her gut was functioning. Here's a useful tip I want to share. When you mince or crush garlic, let it sit for about 10 minutes before cooking with it. That brief resting period allows an enzyme in the garlic to fully activate the allicin compound. If you heat garlic immediately after cutting, you lose some of that benefit. This is a small thing, but it makes a difference. Aim for 1 to 2 cloves per day. You can eat it raw, added to salad dressings or dips, or lightly cooked. I don't recommend taking garlic supplements as a first choice. The whole food form provides a more complex range of compounds. One important caution. In higher doses, garlic can act as a mild blood thinner. If you're currently taking warfarin or any anticoagulant medication, please talk to your doctor before significantly increasing your garlic intake. Our fourth food is one that's been getting a lot of attention in the nutrition research world in recent years, and for good reason: blueberries. You may have heard that blueberries are rich in antioxidants, and that's true. But their benefit for the gut goes beyond antioxidants, and it works through a different pathway than the probiotic foods we've talked about. Blueberries are packed with compounds called polyphenols, natural plant pigments that give berries their deep color. When you eat blueberries, most of those polyphenols pass through your small intestine largely undigested. But when they reach your large intestine, your colon, your gut bacteria get to work on them. They ferment these polyphenols and convert them into compounds called short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs. These short-chain fatty acids are incredibly important. They nourish the cells lining the colon, help regulate inflammation, and support a stronger gut barrier. There's also emerging research showing that polyphenols from blueberries encourage the growth of a particular bacterium called Akkermansia muciniphila, a species that's been linked to healthy metabolism, reduced gut inflammation, and a stronger intestinal lining. In other words, blueberries aren't just feeding you, they're feeding your most beneficial bacteria. I had a patient, 69 years old, named Robert, a retired accountant who had struggled with mild but persistent constipation for years. Nothing severe, but uncomfortable and frustrating. I suggested he add half a cup of blueberries to his morning oatmeal every day. It sounds simple, almost too simple. But after 4 weeks, he reported that things had become noticeably more regular. That kind of shift is not unusual when you consistently nourish the right gut bacteria. How to use them. Fresh or frozen blueberries are both excellent choices. Frozen blueberries actually retain their polyphenols very well, and they're usually more affordable, which makes this a very accessible option year-round. A half cup to 1 cup per day is a good target. A note for those managing blood sugar. Blueberries have a relatively low glycemic index and are generally considered safe, but if you're diabetic or closely monitoring your glucose, track how they affect you and speak with your doctor. Our fifth and final food is one that comes with a small but very effective preparation tip, and once I explain the science, you'll understand why this matters. The food is oats, or beans. Both work through the same mechanism, something called resistant starch. Here's what resistant starch is. When you cook oats or beans and then let them cool completely, ideally in the refrigerator overnight, the starch inside them undergoes a chemical change. It becomes resistant to digestion in your small intestine. That means it passes through to your large intestine largely intact, where your gut bacteria can ferment it. And when they do, they produce that same group of short-chain fatty acids we just talked about, particularly one called butyrate. Butyrate is one of the most important compounds for the health of your colon. It is literally the primary fuel source for the cells lining your large intestine. A steady supply of butyrate helps maintain the integrity of the gut wall, reduces local inflammation, and research increasingly links adequate butyrate production to a lower risk of colon cancer over time. For people over 60, this is not a trivial benefit. The best part about this is the preparation method. You don't need a new ingredient, you just need a slightly different routine. Cook your oats the evening before. Put them in the refrigerator overnight. In the morning, you can eat them cold or reheat them gently. They still retain a portion of the resistant starch after light reheating. That simple overnight step meaningfully increases the resistant starch content compared to eating oats freshly cooked. I have a patient who came up with a variation on this that I've now suggested to many others. She's 73, her name is Eleanor, and she started preparing what she calls her overnight oat jars every Sunday evening. 5 jars, one for each weekday morning. She layers the oats with a little plain yogurt and blueberries. Are you starting to see how these 5 foods can work together? She came back 3 months later and told me her gut health had improved more than in years. How to use them. For oats, cook them the night before and refrigerate. For beans, canned or dried and cooked, these are also high in resistant starch and can be added to soups, salads, or side dishes. One practical note. If you're not used to eating much fiber or resistant starch, increase your intake gradually. Adding too much too quickly can cause temporary bloating or gas as your gut bacteria adjust. Start with a smaller portion and work up over a week or two. And drink plenty of water. Fiber works best when you're well hydrated. Now, I want to be realistic with you. I'm not expecting you to eat all 5 of these foods every single day, especially if several of them are new to your routine. That's not how lasting change works. What I want you to do is start with 2 or 3 that feel most accessible to you and build from there. Consistency over time is what reshapes your gut microbiome, not a perfect meal plan that you can't sustain. That said, I want to show you how these 5 foods can fit together naturally in a single day, because once you see it laid out, it's actually very simple. In the morning, consider an overnight oat jar, the oats you prepared the evening before, topped with a half cup of blueberries and a spoonful of plain yogurt. That's 3 of our 5 foods in one breakfast. It takes no time in the morning because the prep is already done. At lunch, try adding a couple of forkfuls of sauerkraut alongside whatever you're already eating. A sandwich, a salad, a bowl of soup. Sauerkraut pairs with almost anything, and you barely need to think about it. At dinner, cook with garlic. 1 to 2 cloves, minced or sliced, added to whatever protein or vegetables you're already preparing. If you remember to let the garlic sit for a few minutes after mincing before it hits the heat, even better. That's it. That's a full day of gut-supportive eating, and it doesn't require you to overhaul everything you're doing. It layers on top of what you're already eating. What matters most here is not perfection. It's the pattern over weeks and months that changes your gut microbiome. Think of it like tending a garden. You don't plant seeds and expect flowers overnight. But if you keep showing up, keep watering, keep nourishing, the garden eventually thrives. Your gut works the same way. Before I close today, I want to spend a moment on the other side of this equation, because adding gut-supportive foods works best when you're also reducing the things that actively disrupt your gut bacteria. There are three main culprits I see in my patients' routines. The first is ultra-processed foods. I'm talking about packaged snacks, processed deli meats, fast food, and anything with a very long ingredient list. Many of these products contain emulsifiers, chemical compounds used to extend shelf life and improve texture. Research shows that these emulsifiers can disrupt the layer of protective mucus that lines the inside of your gut, which damages the gut wall and harms the bacterial community that lives there. The second is excess sugar. Sugar in reasonable amounts, from fruit for instance, is not the enemy. But a diet high in added sugar feeds harmful bacteria and yeast in the gut, allowing them to crowd out the beneficial species. If your diet currently includes a lot of sweetened beverages, desserts, or sugary condiments, reducing those consistently will give your gut bacteria a much better chance to recover. The third is unnecessary antibiotic use. To be very clear, antibiotics save lives, and when your doctor prescribes them, you should take them. But antibiotics taken without a true medical need, or demanded for viral infections where they have no effect, do significant harm to your gut microbiome without benefit. If you're ever unsure whether antibiotics are necessary, it's completely appropriate to ask your doctor that question directly. The key message here is not to feel restricted or overwhelmed. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be consistent with the good stuff and a little more mindful about the things that work against you. Let me bring this all together for you. Today we covered 5 foods that research supports for restoring gut bacteria naturally, especially for adults over 60. Plain yogurt with live cultures, kimchi or sauerkraut, garlic, blueberries, and cooked and cooled oats. Each one works through a different mechanism. Some deliver beneficial bacteria directly, others feed the bacteria already living in your gut, and others produce protective compounds that support the lining of your colon. Together, they create a genuinely powerful foundation for gut health. Here's what I want to leave you with. Your gut has a remarkable ability to recover at any age. The research on this is clear. The microbial community inside you is not fixed. It responds to what you feed it, often within weeks. That means every meal is an opportunity, not a burden, an opportunity. If you found this helpful today, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Senior Health Review. We put out new content every week designed specifically for adults over 60. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which of these 5 foods are you going to try first? Let me know below. As always, talk to your doctor before making significant changes to your diet, especially if you're managing a chronic condition. I'll see you in the next video.